this week is Steve Black of Union College in Kentucky. Enjoy the episode. Welcome to On the Microphone, and we have my personal mentor, the man who trained me. That is Stephen Ray Black. Steve Black, thank you for being on the show.
Well, thank you, John, for having me. And this seems like it's been a neat thing so far from what you've been doing. I know you've done a few of these already, so looking forward to getting on with it.
Yeah, there would be no group if it wasn't for this man right here, Steve Black.
Don't even.
It's the truth. I'm gonna give a little background. Because we were in the same area for a while. We were in different cities, and I wanted to break in. Well, there was only one guy that was really doing a professional job. There were other guys that were, like, hey, can you read this for the game? Or, hey, you're a dad. Can you say this since your son's playing or your daughter's playing? But there was only one true professional, and sir, it is you. And you have raised the bar in Southeast Kentucky for sure for announcers.
You're too kind, John. You're too kind.
Well, let's get to it. Question number one, where did you start your announcing career?
Interesting story. And I don't mean to be long-winded. I'll try not to be, but I worked at Union College in Barberville, Kentucky, a small NAIA school back in the 90s. And I had a chance meeting with the sports information director at the time. I consider him my mentor, the late, great Scott Cummings. But I met him because I kind of messed up in a public relations situation. I won't get into it, but let's just say I said some things that I shouldn't have said in a situation. And so I actually had to meet the sports information director to get coached on it because it was an athletic matter. And so in that, we actually developed a friendship, and he just needed some help as he was, taking care of ball games there at Union. And so my first stint was just playing bumper music for Union baseball back in, I want to say about 93 or so, 94. And it just kind of led to some other things, one being public address announcing, eventually some broadcasting as well. But I know that's kind of where I got my start, back at Union College in the mid 90s. And so I've been doing that off and on ever since. And I guess the rest is history.
Yeah, I thought for sure you would throw in Jesse D. Lay Elementary School and the Trojan Dome.
Well, that actually came later, John. It's funny that you mentioned that because I stopped working at Union in the late 90s and kind of went into the quote unquote private sector. And again, I was working at Union in student life, so I wasn't even really involved with athletics. Again, it was just a chance meeting. But another one of my good friends, Jeff Frost, who was a graduate of Union, was a teacher at Lay Elementary, and he was also a basketball coach. And so he had asked me to, could you just come over and do the starting lineups? That was basically it. So I did that for a while, and that kind of led into bigger things. And before you know it, I was the voice of an elementary school in Knox County, Kentucky, which kind of led to some other things locally, and eventually doing PA for the local high school, Knox Central, and eventually returning to Union in a public address manner.
You came full circle, brother. So
but
how much
to start? Yeah, that's pretty much the start.
How much time do you put into preparing before a big game? Of course, you get into the rhythm and so forth, and maybe it's a rematch and you know the teams. But let's say that this is a big contest, a district, a region championship. How much time are you putting in preparing for that game?
You had given me the questions beforehand. I had a chance to kind of look at that and think about it. And I was going to answer it this way, John, is this that, to me, I think every game's a big game. I know that there are some games that have a higher level. I understand that, championship games and things like that. But I think the approach to preparing, you always want to prepare to make it your best. It doesn't matter if it's a regular season game in a small elementary gym or a big NCAA national championship game or whatever like that. you just always, want to be prepared. Now, the time that it takes, I think it's just whatever you feel that you need to make sure that you're doing everything that you need to do. So it's kind of hard to put that on there, but I think one of the things that's nice as a PA guy, it's nice to have those lineups definitely way beforehand. A lot of it's pronunciations. You want to make sure that you're, doing the pronunciations correctly, because people will tell you when you don't pronounce names correctly. So that's one of the things in the sense of preparing, but also just kind of getting your mindset in the sense of the flow of the particular sport that you're doing. So I hope that makes sense, but kind of approach that in every game, because bottom line is there are people out there that are entrusting you to do the public address announcing. So you want to do everything it takes to take it as serious as possible. Doesn't matter if it's like your full-time job or if it's something you do on the side. Like myself, I have a regular job in a private sector. I don't work in athletics. This is something I do on the side, but still I want to be prepared and do the best I can for the school or for the organization that I represent.
Absolutely. Great answer, Steve. Now, one of the things that really sets you apart that I've seen over the years is your relationship with players is important to you. Why is that?
Now, that's another good question, John. And I was thinking about that as well. Depending on the sport that you're doing, you may not have a lot of access, to the players. And also, if it's something you're doing like on the side, maybe you're not, like if you don't work at Union or if you don't work for said sports organization, you may not have access to them all the time. But the times or the sports that you do have access, it's just, I think it's just good all around, just to have the best relationship as possible. Uh, and you know, it was kind of hard to answer that in regard, because I want to do everything I can to promote that person, no matter what they're doing. But a lot of times I don't get a lot of actually interaction with them. There's a couple, and that's neat, especially when I was doing elementary ball and in high school ball as well. If you're still in the same area, you can see those people kind of grow up into adults, and so you can still keep that relationship with them. So that's important. They kind of, hey, that you're the voice guy and things like that. So that's kind of neat. Um, but I think in the sense of relationships, always just be in an encouraging format, because no matter what level you're doing, sans a professional level, these are kids, and you just want to be supportive of the kids, be it at elementary level, high school level, college level. I hope that makes sense.
Yes, sir. Next question. Just like myself, you are a huge pro wrestling fan. And on Mount Rushmore, there are four presidents. But who is on your Mount Rushmore? Who's your top four of professional wrestlers?
Uh, John, I tell you, that's another. You come up with some really good questions. I don't know if you can just limit it to just four. I'll do what I can here. And again, everybody, if you're asking the same question to everybody, I'm sure everybody will have their reasons in that. But I didn't thinking about that. I think number one, I put Ric Flair number one. Not in the sense of his personal life. We've kind of seen that a lot lately, and probably not a life you want a pattern, if you will. But I think especially when he was in his prime, I think he did a lot for the sport. And this was, at the time where you had AWA, NWA, and the WWF at the time, the three main organizations. You still had territories. And so the unique thing about Ric Flair was that he was in the NWA that was more territory based. So he would go around to different places and have to do that. That takes a lot to do that. I think people that follow the sport now don't understand that, especially if you're not as old as, say, it I am, or maybe yourself as well. I mean, just remember those days. And so I think it was a lot, kind of a trendsetter, if you will. And there was people before, Flair. So there's so many people there, but I put him there. I put Hulk Hogan there. And the reason I put Hulk Hogan there, again, never really was a fan of Hulk Hogan personally, but he was an integral part of what happened, especially in the 80s and into the 90s. And kind of what you see today is what they call the sports entertainment. And you have to give him credit for that. He is a big personality, and he did a lot to bring the sport mainstream. So Hulk Hogan has to come on there. Steve Austin. I think I put Steve Austin on there. And the reason I put Steve on there is that, uh, you know, uh, personally, if you follow his career, he was up and coming and went through he went through Texas wrestling. That's big time, especially out in Dallas. If you're familiar with the Von Erichs, that's a big training ground there. You get through there, you're going to be pretty rough and tough. But Steve did that well, and I don't think he got his due in WCW. I think it's well chronicled. Wasn't used as well as what he could have been, and the way he was fired. But I think you got to credit Paul Heyman in ECW for allowing Steve to get his the vehicle to get his personality across. And I think eventually, when you allowed him to kind of take control of his character, he made the most of it. And you could talk about the Attitude Era and things like that, but I think if it's not for him, I think we watch wrestling a little bit different these days. So I put Steve Austin on there, and that fourth one, man, John, that's a hard one, but I'll go with what I put. I put Roddy Piper, and I think Roddy Piper. There's if you've seen some, the A&E did a biography on him a couple years ago. I thought it was pretty good, and just the things his career and some of the things that he did. I don't know. I always liked him. I just liked that character. Even back in the day, I think there was interesting things in that documentary. He probably could have made a lot more money. Personally, if he would have kind of played along, especially there in that first WrestleMania there with Mr. T, it is well chronicled. He did not really appreciate Mr. T, being involved in that. He was more of the, traditional wrestler, the kayfabe type stuff. But I just always liked Roddy Piper, so I put him as number 4. But you could put any 4 people in there. There's so many great performers out there, but I will go with mine: Flair, Hogan, Austin, and Piper.
Piper's the one that shocks me. The first 3 are pretty standard. So, yeah, it's always the question on the 4th. But Piper shows that if you want to be a top babyface, you really got to be a top heel first for that big turn.
What did he always say? He said, when you think you have all the answers, I change the question, things like that. And just stuff like that. I always thought his interview skills were pretty cool. And he was, especially, Piper's Pit and things like that. I think, and you can, I may be wrong in this, but Piper's Pit was one of those first, kind of like show within a show type deal. So to me, kind of a trend setting and things like that. So, and I've always liked Piper.
Steve, what's your favorite sport to announce?
Another good question. I think I'm going to say basketball, and that's I think because just the pace of the sport, you've got to be focused. You got to be in it the whole time. You can't take a moment off, or you're not going to sound good. So you got to be in that game the whole time. I like that, just kind of being into that game. If you want to leisurely play pace and maybe have some fun, baseball is really good because the pace of the game, and especially if you're in a press box with some really cool people, and I have over the years, you get that good banter going and things like that, during a ball game, but you can still keep your, professionalism. But to answer your question though, John, I think basketball, and that's the one. I do football and I do basketball currently in a public address format. I like basketball.
I'm with you all the way. Basketball is my number 1 as well, sir. Now, you have done other special events where you've been asked to be on the microphone for. What are some of those other special events you've been asked to speak at?
Well, gosh, so many good questions there, John. But, and I think about that as well. Outside of athletic events, which I mean, the neat thing about it is, I get people coming to me all the time. Hey, we need somebody to fill in. We got this tournament going on. Are you available? Or, can you do this? And it's sports related. I think outside of that, I've done some coordination, especially at the elementary level. I did some of those lay elementary coordinations back in the day. So I was kind of like the MC for that. I'm asked to do weddings here and there. I don't profess to be a really good DJ. I just push play, on the computer that I use, because I'm not only that I do PA, but I'm providing music a lot, at the event. So I'll get asked a lot to maybe, take part in the wedding reception and things like that. So those are the 2 things that I could think of when it comes to that. And also my job, I'm a training manager in a telephone call center. So I do a lot of public speaking anyway. And so it's kind of like my job. I work with trainers. I've been a trainer myself in the classroom for adult learning. So that's kind of like the cool thing about it as well. My regular job is dealing with public speaking, and I get to do this stuff on the side as well.
Now, one thing that I will admit is that the University of Oklahoma is probably, if you look at it all around, probably the top athletic program in the nation. When you look all around, not just
Wow.
one sport,
Oh yeah.
uh, softball, they're competing in women and men's basketball, gymnastics, football. They're just an all around good program, and you are an avid Sooner fan. But if
Yes,
you
sir.
could win just one more national championship, let's say for the next 100 years, you only get one more national title, what sport are you picking to win?
Well, aside from that, as we're taping this, I hope we're just a few days away from another softball championship, but that's beside the point. To answer your question, though, John, men's basketball. And the reason I say that is that, Oklahoma traditionally was always kind of known as a football school. Now I think it's known as a, softball school and in some regard, gymnastics school, great gymnastics programs. They just won the national title in women's gymnastics. The men finished in the final four this year and has been great as well. But I think, I think men's basketball, and the reason for that is that back in the 1980s, high schools and college, the great Billy Tubbs at OU, I think changed that program. I mean, Oklahoma, their basketball program was kind of but he brought it into the limelight and made it relevant. And I still, I wish they could have finished it in 1988 in that championship against Kansas. I still think about that and 5 points away from a championship. But the neat thing about that program is it's been consistent over the years, and a little bit of trouble right now. But I think trying to, in this day and age with transfer portal and NIL, trying to get back to that. But to answer your question, John, basketball. If we just win one more title, I would love to see it. Basketball. Hey, even women's basketball as well. I think that program's on the rise too. So I'll say basketball. Boomer.
Man, I was not expecting that answer. That's very interesting.
Well, football's got seven. And softball has got six right now, and they're an incredible run in softball the last 10 years. It's been great. But I just, when it comes to basketball, Oklahoma, their program is probably, and I have no base on this, but probably top, especially I think the top 30, top 40, programs or so, maybe higher this and that. It's not going to be a blue blood. It'll never be a blue blood. They're not going to match, the UKs and the KUs and the Dukes and the UNCs and UCLAs and all that. But it would just be nice for them to get a championship. And they've come close. And 88 was the closest.
Okay, let's get to know you on a personal level here, Steve. What's your favorite restaurant?
I like BD's Mongolian Grill. I'll stick with that. I don't know if people are familiar with that. That's kind of a Midwestern type chain, but there is a place in Lexington, Kentucky, which is about less than 2 hours from where I live. When in my job, sometimes I get to travel. One time I was traveling to the Tampa St. Pete area to help start a call center or to be a part of that, and found one in Lakeland, Florida. Actually, I believe you lived there one time, Don. But I just love it. I just kind of fell in love with it. Went one time, and so that's the best. I mean, don't get to go there a lot, these days, but I sure do love my BDs.
Yes, did live in Lakeland. Missed those Florida days. Good times. All right. Training others. What's the first thing for a new announcer to learn? Then I have a little story that you probably don't remember after that.
Okay, well, like a match game or something. I hope it works out. As I said, so I was thinking of some different things, but not in a sense any particular order. I think the best part about if you're going to get started in this is just prepare. Just be prepared. It as you mentioned earlier, it's easy sometimes and for people to make like, okay, well, just give somebody a microphone. Maybe they'll read a couple of announcements and that's great. But for those people who do PA and even as a hobby and even as a profession, there's some really great PA announcers out there, and it just doesn't, there's talent that goes with it, but preparation. You got to just be prepared. Be yourself. Don't try to be don't try to be somebody else. You may learn from other people, maybe different ways of how they do things, and that's nice, to be willing to learn, but be yourself. You're going to find your own style. Another thing is that it's not about you. The game goes on with or without you, really. You don't want to become the part of it. I think it's, in some of my style a little bit, especially in basketball, say say a 3-point call or something like that. You can get into a little bit to try to get the crowd going, but you just don't want to be the center of attention, because people didn't come and pay their money to hear you. They came to watch the ball players, right? So you're part of it. You're not the show, but you're part of it. So I think those were a few things that, with someone that's kind of starting out with that. So I hope it matches up. I can't remember the story you're about to say, but I hope it matches up in some way, shape, or form.
100% it matches up. The year is 2012. It's my first time ever announcing. It's a football game, and it was a double header, so it's a big crowd. And I was
Yep.
doing the main event game, I guess you'd put it that way, the nightcap of the two.
Yep.
And of course I'm nervous, and it's kickoff time, and the home team's kicking off. So my team's kicking off. And I said something like this, kicking off for the Wildcats, number 4, John Doe, back to receive for the Warriors, number 22 and number 18. And you got mad with me. Not mad, but mad in your way. But you were like, do not do that again. Do you have a roster for the other team? I was like, no, I just realized
Uh,
that I was not prepared. I knew all the home team stuff, but I did not have the away team. And you're like, don't, if you don't know who they are, don't just say the numbers.
yeah. I mean, with say local radio. I remember listening when I worked at Union, and I was listening to games on local radio. That was one thing that was just kind of like, it was one of those, nail on the chalkboard type deal, where the broadcaster would just call them by number. Okay, I don't know who that is. So, especially on radio when you're not watching, you're not able to see what's going on. It's kind of silly. So, but yeah, I think if you don't know, if you don't have the number or the name to the number, it's probably best just to let it go. I know at the high school level, it's kind of tough because high schools really don't have sports information directors that could provide you with that, and that part is tough too. So a lot of times you have to kind of do it yourself. But okay, so I remember that. Okay, but yeah, and you know what? Probably that family member of number 4 is out there, and they're kind of like, he's got a name, right?
Right. Exactly right. But went right along with what you said about being prepared. But that's how you learn too. Even when you make mistakes, you grow. That's what I always say. Now I've hyped you up pretty big, Mr. Black. So I was
before you
oh,
before
go
you
ahead.
before you jump in, one other thing just kind of came to mind, and I think if you really want to know maybe how well you're doing in a PA type of situation, and it's not always the same with everybody, but I think the biggest compliment that I get is that I've PA'd for certain organizations, so it could be like, well, Steve's the homer, but when you have the opposing fans come up to you and specifically tell you, we really like how you announce, you didn't seem to be, we'll use the term a homer in that, and it was like you kind of down the line in a sense. I think that's a really great compliment, because even though I may be broadcast or PAing for Union College, I don't want to put down the other team, because I want to make it part of the whole big picture, if that makes sense. So
Yeah.
that's probably the greatest compliment, and in the sense of doing this and having fun with this, is when others can come up to you and say, really appreciate that, and so makes you feel good.
Now I've hyped you up pretty big, Steve. So I was wondering if you could do one small announcement, maybe like for if you were at a game doing the national anthem, because that's typically a shorter announcement. Can you give us a little clip of your ability, sir.
Little clip. Okay. Well, let's see. Um, okay. Ladies and gentlemen, will you please rise and remove your hats as we honor America this evening with the playing of our national anthem? How's that?
Great, sir.
Okay.
Man, I enjoy talking to you so much, and I owe you so much when it comes to this field. And again, yeah, you've raised the bar. I know in that area there's a lot of good announcers now, but really, you're the one who raised the bar, and why there are so many good ones now. Um, we always conclude with giving you the floor, giving you the microphone, just to close us out here. So, Steve, the time is now yours.
Well, we talked about this before we recorded, so it was kind of thinking about what to do, and so I don't really have anything to plug or anything like that. I just want to, I think, just say that it's not an easy thing to do what we do, John, and the site that you created and with others that are contributing to that, there's a lot of really great talent out there that does a really good job in what they do in their craft. I know most of the people on here, a lot of them, that's their profession, and they do a really good job with it. So it's kind of neat to have all that. So for those that are part of that, and for CDS again, I don't consider myself anybody special. I just have fun with it. It's really nice to do. If you but you're going to do something, you want to do it right and do it professionally and things like that. So that's a shout out to everybody that are part of this, and yourself. It's really neat to see you. It kind of it's honored to consider him as a mentor, but to kind of see what you've done, you've kind of taken the ball and ran with it, John. And you got a chance to PA a couple of basketball regional tournaments in the area. You've even done some broadcasting. We've done some broadcasting together, but I know you've done some broadcasting up in the Richmond area, and so really neat to see you involved in that. And I think you get a chance to do some PA for EKU softball there, Eastern Kentucky University. So that part's really neat. So shout out to you. One other person I'll give a shout out to, because if it was not for him, I don't get a chance to do some of these other things I get to do besides PA. I do broadcast. I've called football, I've called basketball, and I've called baseball. Kind of a freelance play-by-play guy, not really connected to anybody at the moment, but kind of fill in. There's some outlets within my region that I've been involved in, but a couple people that I give a shout out to. Les Dixon is one. He kind of heads up the L4 Security 13th Region Media Network, and that's kind of a nice little thing here in our region, here in southeastern Kentucky, and some of the things and stuff that he's done over the years. And he's a sports writer, and he's done some radio himself. But I wouldn't be some of the places I've been without him. And then one other person I would mention is John North. And so John, he he went to Union College. He was a mass comm major, got his degree in that. He was the voice of the Bulldogs for many years. He works at a local high school now in Pineville, Kentucky, but he does broadcasting still here and there, and also does some fill in. And I say he's the voice of WYMT, which is a CBS affiliate in Hazard, Kentucky. And so I had the opportunity to work with him this year during a regional tournament. And so I actually was on TV, John, a face for radio being on TV. Can you believe that? But I owe that to John North as well. And really, thank him for that. And I'm going to add one other person. He's not here, but I mentioned the gentleman earlier, Scott Cummings. He was the sports information director at Union College in the 90s. He went to Lebanon University near St. Louis. He was sports information there for almost 20 years. And he's the one that gave me my start. He passed away a few years ago due to cancer, and we miss him every day. But if you want to look up some things, look up Scott Cummings, look up NAIA, and a lot of people, attribute a lot of things to him, and he mentored a lot of people too. And so I'll consider that as one of my mentors. So I'm done with that. I just wanted to give really shout outs. And so without those people, John and others that I haven't mentioned, and I know there's, others out there, to apologize for not mentioning everybody, but I wouldn't get a chance to do what I like to do, even though I don't do it on a full-time basis.
Well, Steve, thank you so much for sharing your expertise, your stories, and your time. We appreciate you, sir.
All right, John. Thank you very much.
Enjoyed this video, please subscribe and share the content. Also, consider joining the Public Address Announcer Facebook group so you can connect with others who are on the microphone.